Hello. Welcome to today's video. So I wanted to share something that I've found extremely useful over the last few years, and that's the idea of purpose over perfection. So something that I really am clear about with myself is how my mind, I believe all our minds, tend to like extremes, right? They seem to like this or that, right? There's something about the way our brains are wired that finds safety, that finds comfort, and in some ways finds stability in the extremes. It tends to be this kind of gray area that we don't always do so well with, or at least I don't always do so well with. And over the years, I've had to, in some ways, retrain myself with regards to my perfectionism. So, one of the things that I like to remind myself is that it's more important to be purposeful than it is to be perfect. And what that means practically is how, let's say I'm going to shoot a video, or I'm going to send an email, or I'm going to put myself out there in some way. I like to remind myself that being perfect is not the objective. And in fact, if I'm attempting to be perfect, I'm never going to do anything, right? Because there's always going to be another reason why what I'm saying isn't just right, right? Or this email or this way I'm putting this sentence together, if I'm writing an article or something like that, isn't exactly how I would want it to be, right? Or even that I'm putting that piece of creation up against essentially some immeasurable standard of excellence that in most cases is not even real, or in some cases constantly will constantly go up, right? And I'll always be reaching, and in that reaching I'll never be producing, or I'll never be creating. And so it's one of the ideas here that, and there's some nuance to this because there is artfulness, there's skill, there's the development of all these things, but I try to remind myself that in most cases good enough is enough. Let's say I'm going to be shooting a video here, for example, or I'm going to send an email out. What I remind myself is, what is my purpose, right? What is the message? What is the clarity that I like to communicate in this offering, or this email, let's say, or this article? And from that place of being clear around what the objective is, right? Maybe I'm wanting to communicate something to a client, or to someone else, and before I jump into what it is I want to say, or before I start creation, maybe I'll make a list and I'll say these are the important points, and then after that I'll let my creativity come out, right? I'll give myself permission to simply create, to draft something, to create something, put something out there. Now before I send that out, right, there's going to be that part of me that maybe wants to clean it up, maybe do some editing. These are all good things. And at the same time, I do my best to keep a watchful eye, right, of or I guess you could say that I keep my hands on the reins, right, of the horse that just wants to go wild and say that's never going to be good enough. And when I reach that point to where those points that I made, or that I wanted to make, even in this video, for example, are made, that's it. It's good enough. And perhaps with a breath, perhaps with a check, maybe running through a spell check or whatnot, I send it off. And what I found over the last few years of really operating this way is a couple things, two things. First is that very rarely is what I put out not enough, right? Again, if what I'm wanting to communicate, I set that out and I'm purposeful about, okay, these are the points, and then I put out those points, everything else is a bit, in some ways, it's insignificant, right? Of course, we can dress things up, we can make things a little bit nicer, right? And make things a little prettier in a lot of ways. But at the core of it is the essence. What is the essence of what I'm looking to communicate? What is it that I'm looking to create? And if I've done those things, if I've done essentially the bare minimums, what is enough, then in most cases what I found is that's enough. The other thing that I've realized is over time, as I've allowed myself to, put together an email that was maybe a little bit edgy, or maybe I needed to communicate something that was a little bit challenging, right? Is that I start to develop this 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 inner resilience that whatever I put out, again, as long as I'm hitting my points, right, and perhaps there is some care that needs to be done with it, but as long as I'm hitting my points and I send it out, now I'm free. And this is really where the core of this is at. Because when we are held in perfectionism, we're never free. And the idea here is, how do we free ourselves of these essentially the mental traps that kind of keep us in ourselves and not showing up and really sharing ourselves with the world. And so to kind of wrap this all up, even in this video, what is enough, right? What is the message that I'm wanting to communicate? And that's simply that I forgot. It's that I know I said it before. Production is more important than perfection. I know that wasn't exactly it, but I think you get the point. It's that purpose over perfection is really the objective here. And sometimes it's not going to be perfect. And in fact, nothing's ever perfect, right? The only thing that's perfect is the illusion that we have in our minds, that we create for ourselves, that in most cases creates suffering, creates judgment, self-judgment, creates shame, and ultimately creates distance from ourselves and the rest of the world. And so whether it's in something like this, whether it's a conversation, whether it's navigating an engagement at a coffee shop, something at work, maybe a conversation. Of course, there is different levels of, let's say, risk and requirement in anything we do. And at the same time, I would invite that in most cases, right, unless we're dealing something, that involves a lot of risk, or a lot of, let's say, holding of other people or situations, all this stuff like that, that's definitely there are, let's say, higher standards that would probably be nice to meet. And even in those cases, if we are purposeful, if we're true to our hearts, if we're true to, if we're clear about how we're coming, how we're approaching these things, what our intentions are, after that, I'd say it's good enough. And if it's not good enough, then that's where we learn. Perhaps we take the feedback. Perhaps we evolve whatever it is we're doing, and we grow from that. But from a very basic level, being productive and purposeful is much more important than just being perfect. So with that, I hope you lead a imperfectly perfect day today, or whatever daytime or nighttime that you find yourself watching this. And I send my good graces to you on this day and the many days to come.